2 milligrams. The size of a few grains of sand. That is all it takes to kill a human being. This is fentanyl. The deadliest drug ever to flood American streets. A synthetic nightmare 50 times more potent than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. And it is everywhere. In 2023 alone, fentanyl killed nearly 70,000 Americans. More than car accidents. More than gun violence. More than any war in recent history. This invisible enemy does not discriminate. It takes teenagers at parties, workers seeking relief from pain, addicts struggling to survive. It devastates families, destroys communities, and leaves a trail of death that stretches across every state in America. This is not just a drug crisis. This is a calculated assault. A trillion-dollar industry fueled by Chinese chemical suppliers, manufactured by Mexican cartels, and smuggled across borders in the most sophisticated operation the world has ever seen. This is the story of how fentanyl conquered America. And why stopping it may be impossible. It begins thousands of miles away, in the industrial zones of China. In nondescript factories and chemical plants scattered across provinces like Hebei, Jiangsu, and Guangdong. These facilities produce what are called precursor chemicals. The building blocks of fentanyl. Compounds with names like NPP and ANPP. N-phenethyl, 4-piperidone and 4-anilino, N-phenethylpiperidine. On paper, these chemicals have legitimate industrial uses. They can be components in pharmaceuticals, manufacturing processes, research laboratories. Because of this, they are legal to produce and export in many countries. This creates a loophole. A gray zone that traffickers exploit with surgical precision. Chinese chemical brokers operate through shell companies. Businesses that appear legitimate on the surface. Veterinary suppliers. Computer retailers. Chemical laboratories. But behind these fronts, they are trafficking the raw materials of death. They advertise on encrypted websites. They communicate through coded messages. They accept payment in cryptocurrency or through complex money laundering schemes. The precursors are packaged in unmarked containers. Labeled as industrial solvents or cleaning agents. They are loaded onto cargo ships, commercial trucks, and planes. They travel through international shipping lanes, passing customs inspections designed to catch finished drugs, not their innocent-looking ingredients. And they arrive in Mexico. In 2018, United States authorities discovered a Chinese national working directly with the Sinaloa cartel. He would synthesize fentanyl in India and traffic it to Mexico. When Chinese regulations began to tighten, the operation simply shifted. Production moved to India. When India cracked down, networks emerged in other countries. The system adapts faster than law enforcement can respond. Today, Mexico is the primary manufacturing hub for fentanyl destined for the United States. Two cartels dominate this deadly industry, the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG. These are not street gangs. They are multinational criminal corporations with revenues in the billions. They have logistics divisions, security forces, political connections, and technological sophistication that rivals legitimate businesses. The cartels discovered something revolutionary about synthetic drugs. Unlike heroin, which requires controlling vast territories where poppy fields grow, or cocaine, which needs coca plantations in South America, fentanyl can be produced anywhere. A small laboratory. A basement. A warehouse. All you need are the precursor chemicals, basic equipment, and someone with rudimentary chemistry knowledge. The production is crude but effective. In Sinaloa State, hidden among cattle ranches and half-built houses, fentanyl cooks work in makeshift labs. These are often former farmers who lost their livelihoods when the cartels shifted from heroin to synthetics. They wear hazmat suits, dark glasses, and cloth masks. Some believe drinking beer or milk will counteract the effects of inhaling fentanyl vapors. It does not. Many have died from exposure. The labs themselves are deliberately primitive. 10 by 10 foot rooms filled with jugs labeled pure acetone, Chinese chemical, and fentanyl XXX. The toxic fumes can blind, burn skin, or cause respiratory failure. But the profit margins are astronomical. A cook can make $2,500 a week. The cartels can produce kilograms of fentanyl with just hundreds of dollars in precursor chemicals. Those kilograms, when cut and distributed in the United States, are worth tens of millions. The efficiency is staggering. 1 kilogram of fentanyl can produce approximately 500,000 lethal doses. In July 2023, Mexican soldiers captured 543 kilograms of fentanyl in a single bust. That represented enough poison to kill every person in the United States more than twice over. And that was just one seizure. But production is only the beginning. The real genius of the fentanyl trade lies in smuggling. How do you move massive quantities of the most illegal substance on Earth across the most heavily monitored border in the world? The answer is simpler than you might think. You hide it in plain sight. 80% of fentanyl entering the United States is seized at the southwest border. But not where most people imagine. It is not coming across with migrants walking through the desert. It is coming through official ports of entry. The same crossings where millions of legitimate vehicles, trucks, and travelers pass every single day. On an average day in March 2025, over 200,000 personal vehicles crossed from Mexico into the United States. More than 100,000 pedestrians. 21,000 cargo trucks carrying 37,000 containers. 350 buses. 31 trains pulling 3,300 rail cars. That is over 700,000 individual opportunities to hide something the size of a sugar packet that could kill thousands. The cartels exploit this volume with surgical precision. They recruit smugglers, known as mules. Most are not hardened criminals. They are desperate Americans lured by promises of easy money. $1,000 to $10,000 for a single trip. Cross the border, pick up a package, drive it back. Simple. Safe. Or so they are told. According to United States Sentencing Commission data from 2023, 86.4% of individuals convicted of fentanyl trafficking were United States citizens. The average age was 34. These are people with families, jobs, debts. People willing to take a risk for money they desperately need. The smuggling methods are sophisticated. Fentanyl is hidden in secret compartments welded into vehicle frames. Concealed in spare tires, gas tanks, door panels. The pills are wrapped in carbon paper to defeat X-ray machines and coated in tape to confuse drug-sniffing dogs. Some batches are tested before export. If they smell faintly like popcorn, the dosage is correct. Larger shipments are mixed with legitimate cargo. A truck carrying produce might have kilograms of fentanyl hidden among the crates. A commercial shipment of auto parts might conceal pills in engine blocks. The sheer volume of legal trade makes comprehensive inspection impossible. Customs agents cannot physically search every vehicle without bringing commerce to a halt. Between 2021 and 2024, Department of Homeland Security enforcement efforts captured record amounts of fentanyl. Over 55 million fake pills in 2024 alone. That represents 367 million potentially deadly doses. But law enforcement officials admit this is likely only a fraction of what gets through. For every seizure, countless shipments reach their destination. Once in the United States, fentanyl floods the black market with terrifying speed. It is sold on street corners, yes. But increasingly, it is distributed through encrypted apps, social media platforms, and online marketplaces. Dealers advertise on Snapchat, Instagram, and encrypted messaging services. Buyers order like they are purchasing pizza. The transaction is digital. The delivery is often made through dead drops, similar to the Russian Zakladka system. But here is where fentanyl becomes uniquely deadly. It is not just sold as fentanyl. It is mixed into everything. Fake prescription pills that look identical to oxycodone, Xanax, or Adderall. Powdered cocaine. Methamphetamine. Even marijuana in some cases. Users who think they are taking one drug are actually ingesting something 50 times more potent. The Drug Enforcement Administration seized over 34 million fentanyl pills in just the first months of 2025. Lab analysis shows many of these pills are inconsistent in dosage. One pill might contain a safe amount. The next from the same batch could be lethal. It is Russian roulette in pharmaceutical form. Why do cartels do this? Why contaminate other drugs with something so dangerous? The answer is coldly calculated. Fentanyl is cheap. Heroin is expensive to produce. Cocaine requires smuggling from South America. But fentanyl can be manufactured for pennies and provides a more intense high. It maximizes profit while minimizing cost. United States wiretaps of Sinaloa cartel leaders revealed chilling conversations. They explicitly discussed creating streets of American junkies. They expressed complete indifference to the deaths they caused. One intercepted message read, "Our formula does not kill. But if you change the product, then there can be a big problem." They blamed American dealers for overdoses, even as they flooded the market with poison. The human cost is almost incomprehensible. In 2023, synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, killed approximately 70,000 Americans. That is 191 deaths every single day. More than 5 lives lost every hour. But those numbers, as horrifying as they are, do not tell the full story. Behind each statistic is a person. A son who went to a party and never came home. A mother who took what she thought was a prescription painkiller for her back. A veteran struggling with injuries who turned to street drugs when legal prescriptions ran out. A teenager who made one mistake, took one pill, and died in their bedroom while their parents slept in the next room. Sarah was 17. Honor student. Soccer player. She took what she thought was Percocet for a sports injury. It was fentanyl pressed into a counterfeit pill, purchased from a dealer she met on Snapchat. Her father found her the next morning. She had been dead for 6 hours. Marcus was 32. Factory worker. Father of 2. After a workplace accident, he was prescribed opioids for pain. When the prescription ran out, he turned to street drugs. He thought he was buying heroin. It was 90% fentanyl. He overdosed in his truck during his lunch break. His daughter was waiting for him to pick her up from school. These stories repeat thousands of times, in every state, every community. No demographic is immune. Fentanyl deaths are rising among all racial groups. Black Americans saw overdose rates increase by nearly 7,000% between 2013 and 2020. Hispanic communities are devastated. Native American reservations face crisis-level death rates. White suburban teenagers are dying at parties. Urban professionals are dying alone in apartments. The age range is terrifying. Teenagers experimenting for the first time. People in their 20s and 30s in the prime of their lives. Middle-aged workers seeking pain relief. Even elderly Americans who accidentally ingest contaminated medication. From 2021 to 2024, over 15,000 young people under 35 died from fentanyl overdoses. The economic cost is equally staggering. In 2023 alone, the fentanyl crisis cost the United States economy an estimated $2.7 trillion. That is nearly 10% of the entire gross domestic product. Of this astronomical sum, 41%, $1.1 trillion, comes from the value of lives lost. 49%, $1.34 trillion, represents lost quality of life for those living with addiction. The remaining 10%, $277 billion, covers healthcare costs, lost productivity, crime-related expenses, law enforcement, judicial proceedings, and incarceration. To put this in perspective, even pessimistic estimates of economic damage from major trade disruptions pale in comparison. Fentanyl is not just killing people. It is crippling the economy, overwhelming healthcare systems, flooding prisons, destroying families, and decimating entire communities. But there is a twist in this story. A development that nobody predicted. Starting in 2023, something changed. For the first time since the crisis began, overdose deaths started declining. By 2024, deaths had dropped by nearly 25%. From 114,000 deaths in the 12 months ending August 2023, down to 87,000 in the period ending September 2024. That is 27,000 fewer deaths. 70 lives saved every single day. Among young people under 35, the decline is even more dramatic. A 40% reduction in drug deaths. Roughly 15,000 fewer young Americans dying compared to 2021, the deadliest year on record. What happened? How did the tide suddenly turn? Researchers offer multiple theories. Wider distribution of naloxone, commonly known as Narcan. This medication can reverse opioid overdoses within minutes. It is now available without prescription in most pharmacies. Police officers carry it. Schools stock it. Family members of users keep it on hand. Thousands of lives have been saved by rapid Narcan administration. Another factor may be changes in the fentanyl supply itself. Some researchers believe dealers are cutting fentanyl with less potent substances, making each dose less likely to be immediately lethal. This is not compassion. It is business. Dead customers cannot buy more drugs. Cartels may be adjusting formulas to keep users alive longer. Increased access to addiction treatment has played a role. More Americans are seeking help. More programs are available. Medications like buprenorphine and methadone help manage withdrawal and cravings, allowing people to stabilize their lives without resorting to street drugs. But perhaps the most significant factor is generational behavior change. During the COVID pandemic, teenagers and young adults began using drugs and alcohol at dramatically lower rates. By 2024, the number of teens abstaining from all substances reached its highest level in decades. Researchers call this trend unprecedented. Addiction expert Dr. Nora Fokow, director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, suggests that years of devastation caused by fentanyl have created a deterrent effect. Generation Z witnessed the destruction firsthand. They saw friends die. They attended funerals. They watched families torn apart. And many chose not to take the risk. Data shows younger Americans are shifting away from opioids and alcohol toward what they perceive as safer drugs. Cannabis. Psychedelics. Substances with lower overdose risk. While still concerning from a public health perspective, this shift is objectively saving lives. But experts warn this progress is fragile. The fentanyl crisis is far from over. 87,000 deaths per year is still catastrophic. That is more than double the number of Americans killed in car accidents annually. It is more than the total deaths from the entire Vietnam War, every single year. And there are threats to this tentative progress. Recent federal budget cuts have frozen or eliminated grants supporting frontline drug treatment and harm reduction programs. Public health agencies face massive funding reductions. Treatment centers are closing. Outreach programs are being shut down. The very infrastructure that helped reduce deaths is being dismantled. The Trump administration has proposed billions in cuts to science and health agencies responding to the crisis. If these cuts are implemented, experts predict death rates could surge again. Progress could evaporate. The brief moment of hope could become another false dawn in decades of devastation. There is also the evolution of the drug supply itself. Cartels are not static. They adapt. New synthetic opioids are constantly being developed. Substances even more potent than fentanyl. Carfentanil, used to tranquilize elephants, is 10,000 times more potent than morphine. A single grain can kill a human. It has already appeared in some drug seizures. Xylazine, a veterinary sedative known on the streets as tranq, is increasingly being mixed with fentanyl. It causes severe tissue damage, leading to horrific wounds and amputations. It does not respond to Narcan, making overdoses even more difficult to reverse. In some regions, over 90% of seized fentanyl now contains xylazine. The cartels are also diversifying. Beyond fentanyl, they traffic methamphetamine, cocaine, and new synthetic drugs. They have expanded into other criminal enterprises: human trafficking, fuel theft, wildlife smuggling. They control not just drug routes, but political systems, legal economies, and entire regions of Mexico. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, designated by the United States as a foreign terrorist organization, generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually from fentanyl trafficking alone. They use this money to buy weapons, bribe officials, and wage war against rival cartels. The violence in Mexico has reached levels comparable to active war zones. Tens of thousands die each year in cartel-related violence. And the reach is global. Mexican cartels operate in Europe, Asia, Australia. Chinese criminal networks launder cartel money through international banking systems. Fentanyl produced in Mexico is showing up in Canada, Europe, and even back in Asia. What began as an American crisis is becoming a worldwide catastrophe. Efforts to stop the flow are failing. For every laboratory the Mexican military shuts down, 3 more open. For every major trafficker arrested, a dozen replacements step up. Seizures are at record highs, but so is production. Law enforcement describes it as trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. International cooperation is complicated. China agreed to regulate fentanyl precursors in 2019, but enforcement is inconsistent. Chemical manufacturers simply shift to unregulated compounds that are molecularly similar but technically legal. It is a cat-and-mouse game where the criminals are always one step ahead. Mexico's government response has been criticized as inadequate. Former President López Obrador focused on what he called the economic roots of violence rather than directly confronting cartels. His policy of abrazos, no balazos, hugs not bullets, was intended to reduce conflict but allowed cartels to expand their power. Current efforts remain hampered by corruption, insufficient resources, and the sheer scale of cartel influence. The United States-Mexico border remains the critical vulnerability. Despite billions spent on enforcement, technology, and personnel, the fundamental problem persists. The volume of legitimate trade and travel is so immense that comprehensive screening is impossible. 700,000 daily crossings cannot all be thoroughly searched without destroying the economy. Some experts argue the solution requires a completely different approach. Decriminalization of drug use, treating addiction as a medical issue rather than a criminal one. Portugal implemented this model in 2001 and saw dramatic reductions in overdose deaths and HIV transmission. But in the United States, such policies face fierce political opposition. Others advocate for safer drug supply programs. Providing pharmaceutical-grade opioids to addicts in controlled settings, eliminating exposure to contaminated street drugs. Canada has piloted such programs with promising results. But again, political and social resistance is strong. The reality is that there is no simple solution. Fentanyl is cheap to produce, easy to smuggle, enormously profitable, and devastatingly effective. The demand is driven by legitimate pain, inadequate healthcare, economic despair, and the neurological reality of addiction. Supply is maintained by sophisticated international criminal networks with resources that rival nation-states. This is not just a drug problem. It is a symptom of deeper fractures. Income inequality. Healthcare inaccessibility. Economic hopelessness in communities hollowed out by deindustrialization. Social isolation. The opioid crisis began with pharmaceutical companies pushing prescription painkillers in the 1990s, creating millions of addicts through legal means. When prescriptions were cut off, those people turned to heroin. When heroin was infiltrated with fentanyl, the death rate exploded. Fentanyl preys on the vulnerable. The injured worker who cannot afford surgery. The veteran with untreated PTSD. The teenager experimenting at a party. The chronic pain patient abandoned by the medical system. The homeless person seeking any escape from misery. These are not moral failures. These are human beings in crisis, and fentanyl offers a solution that kills them. The pills look identical to legitimate medication. The powder is indistinguishable from heroin. There is no way for a user to know what they are taking without laboratory testing. Even experienced addicts cannot tell. And 2 milligrams, invisible to the naked eye, is enough to stop a heart. Families are left with impossible questions. Parents wondering what they missed. Spouses replaying the last conversation. Children who will never understand why mommy or daddy did not come home. Friends who wish they had said something, done something, anything to prevent the death they saw coming but felt powerless to stop. Communities are hollowed out. Schools lose students. Employers lose workers. First responders become traumatized from witnessing death daily. Hospitals overflow. Morgues run out of space. Foster care systems are overwhelmed with children whose parents are dead or incapacitated. The ripple effects touch everyone, even those who never touched drugs. And it continues. Right now, as you hear these words, fentanyl is being manufactured in a lab in Sinaloa. It is being smuggled across the border in a hidden compartment. It is being sold on a street corner or through an encrypted app. It is being ingested by someone who has no idea they are about to die. The machine keeps running. The bodies keep piling up. The crisis grinds on. The decline in deaths is encouraging. 27,000 fewer Americans dead is 27,000 families spared unimaginable grief. But we cannot declare victory. We cannot become complacent. 87,000 deaths per year is still a catastrophe. That is a mid-sized American city completely wiped out, every single year. How many more will die before real change happens? How many more families must be destroyed? How many more generations will be scarred? The answer depends on choices we make now. Investment in treatment and prevention. Addressing root causes of addiction. International cooperation to disrupt supply chains. Holding pharmaceutical companies and dealers accountable. Supporting communities ravaged by the crisis. Or we can continue as we are. Watching the death toll, hoping it keeps declining, knowing it could surge again at any moment. Treating victims as criminals. Stigmatizing addiction. Underfunding healthcare. Allowing cartels to operate with near impunity. Accepting that this is just how things are. Fentanyl is not a natural disaster. It is not an act of God. It is a human-made catastrophe, driven by profit, enabled by policy failures, and sustained by societal indifference. It can be stopped. But only if we decide that American lives are worth more than political convenience, more than budget cuts, more than the massive profits flowing to criminals. 2 milligrams. That is all it takes. A few grains of sand. Invisible. Odorless. Tasteless. And absolutely lethal. This is the enemy. This is what is killing America, one overdose at a time. The question is not whether we can stop it. The question is whether we will. Before the next victim. Before the next family is destroyed. Before another generation is lost to a crisis we had every opportunity to prevent. This is fentanyl. America's deadliest epidemic. And it is happening now.